Hello, my name is Sean Wren and welcome to a special Sean Wren podcast. The reason why it's special is because last week I sat and talked to screenwriter and Forbes film journalist Mark Hughes. Our chat is split into two parts, with part one of our interview focusing on getting to know Mark a bit more, from his Superman screenplays to how he got into writing for Forbes and plenty more. And part two, which will be coming soon, will be about the DCU and his visit to the Justice League set. So without further ado, here's part one of my interview with Mark Hughes. Yeah, so today's big news was obviously the Oscars, so I just wanted to hear your opinions.
Yes, I was just actually kind of looking over the nominees, the list of the nominations, and how off base I was in some things and how correct I was on others. And
Were you quite surprised to see Suicide Squad nominated?
Yeah, I was actually. I mean, I liked the movie, but I definitely did not think that we would be talking about the Oscar-nominated Suicide Squad.
No, I don't think anyone was.
Well, I congratulate them for it. I'm the makeup category. I'm just like, they're the only category where the people are like, I can only think of three.
Yeah, no, right? I was thinking of because obviously the BAFTA nominations came out a couple of weeks ago, and they had at least 5 nominees for.
Yeah, this happens with the Oscars a lot. Is for the makeup and the original song category. Sometimes I guess they wait till the last minute to fill out their ballots or something, and they can only think of 3. I don't know what's going on, but it's considering how many movies could have been nominated.
Yeah.
In that category, there were some great options, like some terrific options, and they just were like, not now.
No, I mean, I can understand why hair and makeup, though, because it was quite visual in that sense, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. It's just so weird to me that they only picked... There
3.
were so many movies, they could have easily picked 2 other films to make it 5.
Yeah, La La Land.
And it's just like, so many
Hidden Figures.
Obvious choices. It's like, how did you not think of any where they fell asleep at their desk filling out the ballot, and at the last minute they had to mail it, and they were like, I didn't have time to put 5, I only had time to put 3.
But I mean, I would have liked to see Batman vs Superman nominated for costumes.
Yes, thank you.
I think costume design, I mean, maybe not in other areas, but I think more of the visual and behind-the-scenes stuff could have been.
Yeah, I would have nominated it over... I mean, I won't get into splitting it, but there's a couple of nominees that I would have, for costume design, that I would have put Batman vs. Superman ahead of for sure.
Yeah.
So, I was disappointed in that regard. With the hairstyling and makeup, I just think Silence and La La Land were so obvious possible choices that to leave those out just seemed really odd to me. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, if you just need something to stick on the list, like we don't have 5, there's some obvious ones you could have gone with there. So it was really weird to me that they left so many obvious choices off. But oh well.
Yeah, exactly. So what was the first comic book that you read and that got you hooked into this genre?
The very first comic book I read was a Batman comic book. It didn't have a cover on it. I learned to read from comic books.
Right.
I have 9 brothers and sisters, and we lived in a tiny house, a very small little house, and my siblings were all already in school ahead of me, so they would play school, and being the younger, I was the next to the youngest, so I have a younger brother. Everyone else was older than me. And they taught me to read. 2 of my older brothers actually taught me to read because they read comic books, and they had some old comics that friends had given them, and Batman comic books and Captain America comic books and Spider-Man comics. And Batman, it was Ra's al Ghul was in prison, and he had a pistol, and Batman is there wearing his mask, but he's dressed as a prison guard, and Ra's al Ghul turns the gun on himself and shoots himself and says, I challenge, they're going to blame Batman and think Batman did it, and he says, I challenge you to prove it, to prove your innocence. Right. And that was the first thing, that's the first comic and the first thing that I remember sitting down and struggling through the words and understanding and learning to read by myself.
Do you remember the name of the comic book?
No, I know it off, and I am not. I'm drawing a blank right now. I apologize.
No, that's fine. No.
I'm on my first cup of coffee here, so I'm still kind of waking up.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I mean, you boy was up early for the Oscar nominations, and
I remember all the details, and I remember the drawing of Roz with the gun turned on himself, firing it, and Batman with the hat, and a guard uniform, but still with the Batman man. I remember all of that, but not the specific detail of the name of it right now. I constantly forget that, and it's something that I should be able to remember, unfortunately, but I just don't. So
what was the first? What was the comic book that goes, right? I'm actually a fan of these books now, and I'm going to read one every week.
That actually, it was that comic book being able. I was before I could even read by myself. Just the images of Batman, and my brothers were artists, and they would sit and draw Batman, and I was obsessed and fascinated with Batman. I watched the Super Friends, as a kid, and I watched. They had these old '60s Batman and Robin cartoons that would, I don't know if you've ever seen them, but they're on YouTube.
Were they?
It's an old.
Did they start Adam West? Were they voiced by Adam West?
No, they were later. They got Adam West to do the voice in the 70s when they revived that cartoon and that had Batman on it. But the original version in the 60s was serious. It played it straight. It was not campy or comic.
No.
It was more like the comic books of the time. And it was it's really, for what it was for the time period, it was really good. And it was I used to just watch it endlessly, and I loved that cartoon. So I already, before I was reading like fully by myself, I was already, and by the time I was 5, I could sit down and read the comic books on my own at that point. But and I didn't need somebody going over and teaching me the words and stuff. But I was already obsessed with Batman and comic books and superheroes because of the imagery and the implications of it, and because my older brothers were doing it, and they were, I wanted to be like them, so all of those things kind of played into it. I was drawing in first grade. I would come home and I would sit and draw my own Spider-Man and Batman comic books, just on lined notebook paper, just draw my own like one-page little stories, and I would copy images out of the comics and stuff like that. So
yeah, I mean,
it was a love affair that started early.
Yeah, I mean, like for myself, it was sort of more of a. I got into comic books quite late because in the UK there was not such a thing as a comic book shop or a store or whatever. So So I started reading comic books with the New 52.
Oh wow, that's interesting. So are you going back now and reading and kind of filling in the gaps with the old stuff? Yeah,
I'm still on the New 52, and I got like the main Batman, like The Dark Knight Returns, and I recently purchased The Long Halloween, and I started reading that, and I've been reading Injustice because that's more my jam. And then there's been like Civil War, and gone back to reading that before the film came out. So I was like, but yeah, I mean, like my introduction was the 90s animated films. I think they'll probably, like a lot of 20s and millennials, will be the exact same way. Yeah. A lot of fans I talk to, it's the Batman animated series and Batman Mask of the Phantasm, and then the Spider-Man. Yeah, the animated Spider-Man. There's series. Nothing. Those were the things that did it for him, Yeah. So then, what was the first film you were like? You left the cinema like wide-eyed and think, bloody hell, this was amazing, both as a child and as an adult. Jaws was the movie which remains. Most people are surprised to know that Jaws is my favorite movie, and Jaws is probably pound for pound. I usually tend to consider it the best Hollywood film as far as blockbuster and just all factors taken into account. Pure artistically, The Godfather, and there's other movies that are great, great cinema, and that are better overall on a technical level and on those ways. But for pure enjoyment and everything about summer movie going, Jaws is just that's it. That's the one for me. And I sorry, I had to check.
No, that's fine. No. Yeah, I saw Jaws when I was a kid. I saw it very young at a drive-in, actually, and became obsessed with it. And interestingly enough, my obsession with dialogue
Oh, wow.
And my love of movies came, 2 films that started it for me were Jaws, when I saw it on the big screen, and then Taxi Driver, which after Taxi, it's a weird film for a kid to watch, I know, but when it came to television, they would run it late at night.
Yeah.
When it first came on TV, they would run it as the late night movie. And in our house was so small that I slept in the living room on the couch. There weren't enough rooms in the house for everybody to have a room. So I slept in the living room. And so I'm like 6 years old or 7 years old watching Taxi Driver on regular TV. So the worst like profanity and stuff like that was cut out of it. But I was just obsessed with this movie that was like, it had a voiceover, which I've never seen anything like that. And it's inside this guy's head, and he's going crazy, and he's crazy, but he thinks that he's doing the right thing. And then in the end, he tries to do something terrible, and it doesn't work, and he gets caught, so he runs away, and then he becomes a hero, and everyone thinks he's this hero when he's really this it's so complicated, and it just completely blew my mind as a kid. And the next time it came on, we had a VCR, and I put a VCR tape in, and I recorded it, and I would watch that movie for years, over and over, just amazed at the dialogue and the acting. And so I would fast forward to some of the key scenes, like the scene where he's talking to the older taxi driver, and the guy, he's asking him, he's saying, I got some bad ideas in my head, and the guy is telling him, don't worry so much, you live, one person lives, one person dies, somebody's born, I envy you, your youth. That whole thing is so realistic. And I was like, how do people do that? And that started my true fascination with filmmaking right there. And that's from that moment I wanted to make movies, and I wanted to write movies. From watching that movie, 6 and 7 years old, I dreamed about someday being able to write a movie and make a movie.
Well, is that still your dream as well?
Yes, most people, for whatever reason, don't realize that besides Forbes, I also am a screenwriter, and I've written 17 screenplays and teleplays and pilots for TV shows and things like that. So, and I haven't had anything produced and put on a screen yet, but I've sold. I've been paid. I've been hired to write. I've ghostwritten some screenplays that did go into production, and I've written some that were sold, some that were optioned, so including 2 Superman scripts. Actually, I wrote 2 Superman screenplays.
Were they live action or animated?
Live action. I wrote a sequel screenplay to Superman Returns, and got an agent actually who will remain nameless, but who has ties to Warner Brothers, and tried to get that in and pitch that, and then and even had the agent. Had sat down and talked to one of the producers that was working on Superman projects about it, and then they said, well, we're thinking we're going to reboot. So then I wrote a Superman reboot screenplay, actually, and got an additional agent working on that who made Damnation Alley and had done some other movies, and was tied to Warner Brothers, and we were doing a whole presentation with artwork and with concept art and everything for the project. And then worked on that for 3 years, and then found out that Chris Nolan and David Goyer were working on a reboot, and it was like, well, Chris Nolan is going to do a Superman reboot, then you may as well just hang yours up. Nobody's going to be interested in whatever yours is, but a lot of similarities, actually. So I was on the right track. So I was I at least was thinking the same way, because mine had a world engine in it and some other things. So it was cool. Took a lot of the same inspirations.
Did you have ideas for actors to play Superman when you were writing it? I know it's like a hard question to answer.
No, I actually did. I had entire cast lists, actually. Sean Ferris from Never Back Down. I don't know if you've seen the movie, but he was, at the time, my idea was to do have a younger cast, and Evan Rachel Wood for Lois, and Sean Ferris for Superman, and I thought, go for an early 20s Superman, start younger, and then you have a lot more leeway. You can show him as his powers grow, as he builds his relationship, as he becomes a journalist and all that kind of thing. So, and interestingly, my choice for Lex Luthor was Alec Baldwin doing an impersonation of Donald Trump. That was my actual that's who I wrote. I wrote the character in that voice of,
Really?
if Alec Baldwin were playing Lex Luthor as Donald Trump, essentially.
Would it have been a bald Alec Baldwin, or would he lost his hair during an incident?
He would lose his hair. He would be doing the whole comb over thing, and then he would slowly go bald, and he would just shave it eventually. But my idea was that Luthor would be someone who thought of himself as the hero. He thought he was the good guy, and he was convinced Superman was an existential threat to humanity and to human hope and human endeavor, because when you've got a God who can do anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And who's like, I was bored, so I flew to Jupiter this morning and came back. Well, what's the point of humanity spending 20 years on a mission to Jupiter when Superman can go and come back and be like, so my Lex Luthor idea was that he was. So anyway, that was my thought was play Lex Luthor as Donald Trump, and someone who's convinced that he can save the world from itself, basically.
And will this tied in with any future films, like a Batman, or would you have had cameos from other DC heroes?
I
villains?
actually had, it was a 3-film project, and I had the finished screenplay for the first movie, and then I had a sequel, and that set up Max Lord building the Justice League, but it was not, at the time, it was an international league, and Earth was creating its own heroes to counteract any potential future alien, because the first story was an alien invasion from Krypton. It was Kryptonians who survived the explosion, come to Earth. They have a world engine type thing, except I don't call it a world engine. I call it the totem. It's a Kryptonian totem, and it's a giant device that converts Earth into Krypton. And Superman has been traveling the world, creating this urban legend kind of thing of a hero, and he comes back, and he's Superman for the first time when this happens. Yeah. And so the next film is Earth is like, oh my God, there are aliens, and the whole concept of that. And my Superman even was a symbol of hope, and that was the whole idea, was to make it that it's all about hope, and that he is here to symbolize hope in a world that no longer has hope. And the world is afraid of him and is fearful of him, and starts creating these other heroes. And gradually, so I had Blue Beetle and Captain Atom, but I didn't have Batman and Wonder Woman introduced yet in it. That idea was that they would come in a future movie, and I wrote a treatment for a Wonder Woman movie as well, and how she comes, and it's all kind of set in that same grounded kind of approach to storytelling.
Oh, well, that sounds fascinating.
It was fun. I mean, it's I look at it now, and I'm glad that I did it, because it was one of the first scripts that I ever wrote. It was actually the first script I wrote was was the sequel to Superman Returns, and then the reboot was the third script that I ever wrote. So I look back at it, and it was fun, and I learned a lot from it, and I still, I'm glad we have the DCU we have now, but I think that I was onto something, and that I think it would have all made for a great movie.
Yeah, so how did the whole getting in with Forbes and the whole journalism aspect came from writing screenplays and scripts? Yeah,
I studied in college. My degree was in political science, and my minor was in criminal justice, but I was trying to double major, so I actually went for 8 years, and ended up I was 2 courses away from getting my double major with the criminal justice bachelor's as well, and I decided that it had been long enough, and I didn't want to go for another year or two, and I was like, what's the point? I've got enough at this point. But because of that, I had to fill out a lot of years. I had to fill in a lot of, so I took a lot of writing, technical writing, and fiction writing, and journalism courses, and I wrote for the newspaper while I was there the whole time. I wrote a comedy column, and then I also wrote a political op-ed column, and did that for years. And then I worked in politics for quite a while. I worked for a senator. I worked on Bill Clinton's presidential campaigns. 2 of his campaigns, I was on those. And then just got really burned out and disillusioned with politics, and eventually became started doing journalism, newspaper and radio and online journalism in around 2000, and did that until 2006, and then I moved to DC and lived on Capitol Hill. I lived there before, but I went to work on Capitol Hill in 2006, doing campaign advertising and media and writing issue ads and campaign ads and stuff. And so started getting back into doing more of that kind of a different type of media stuff. And on the side, I wrote the Superman script. And just because I thought, I really wanted to do a sequel to Superman Returns, and just to see if I could do it. I didn't really intend to try to pursue anything in film at that moment because I had a good job and was working, and I was married. My wife and I both worked for the same NGO in DC. And the script was good enough that I actually got one of the people who reps Vin Diesel ended up and who's produced some of his films repped me and wanted to take my script into Warner. And I was like, oh, okay. So I kept writing after that kind of on the side, and then was doing well enough in that it was worth quitting my day job and just focusing my career on the screenwriting for a while. And while I was doing that, there's a site called Quora, and there's a site called, as you know, Batman on Film. And I had been writing op-eds for Batman on Film for several years. I started in like 2005, and so by 2008 or 2009, I'd been writing for Batman on Film for several years, doing op-eds and stuff like that. And then I started writing at Quora, Quora. And at the time, they had a lot of tech people on it, but they didn't have anybody who wrote about film. But everybody on the site loved movies. So people would post questions about movies, and I started answering some of them. Talking about, I've been doing screenwriting for a few years, so I was like saying my thoughts on movies, my thoughts on writing and on screenwriting. And I became very popular there, and I built up a following. And one day somebody asked, is it possible to really be Batman in real life? And so I wrote this very long, joking kind of like, here's what you would have to do to really try to be Batman in real life, and why it would never work and would be pointless and it's completely unrealistic. And it was funny, and it went viral, and it ended up being in it ended up in a magazine in Silicon Valley, and it went viral online. And the managing editor at Forbes, one of the managing editors, contacted me and said they wanted to run the article, and asked me if I'd be interested in doing a regular article, just writing regularly freelance for Forbes. And they had seen that article, and they looked at my other writing and decided, at that time, Forbes had very little entertainment and movie type coverage.
No, because I even always thought of Forbes as a like money or financial or political stuff.
Right.
Even in the UK, I never knew them for film at all.
So when I started, they had a couple of other people writing about movies and TV, but not very much. So I was one of the early people, and they were just starting to kind of go with this new blogging platform and having freelance contributors and stuff like that. So I said, of course, yes, I would do it. And it took me a few months to get my bearings and to figure out what kind of voice I wanted and what I wanted to do. But then it just took off, and I was very lucky to have the opportunity and to be in a position where I could take advantage of that opportunity. So I'm grateful for that, and I just kept it up, and I kept writing screenplays on the side, I've got one right here by the bed. I buy screenplays and read them all the time. I'm always writing. I've usually always got 3 or 4 ideas I'm working on for it, and then with Forbes, the longer I wrote, the more the studios would give me, people would talk to me or email me some little bits of information. I started getting invited to screenings. I moved to, my wife and I moved here to Los Angeles, and we live in West Hollywood now. And once I moved here, things really took off. Because if you want to work in film, and if you want to write about film, you can do it. Technically, you can do it anywhere, but if you really, really want to do it and be hands-on, at some point you've got to come to Hollywood. You do. You really have to. So, if in the United States anyway. So, you can live in New York and do film and write about film, but it's not the same, and if you do that, you're going to end up spending a lot of time commuting over to Hollywood. Yeah. I think 99% of people, there's that small number of people who can manage to be successful outside of it, but you really have to be here. So we came here, and it's things just have really improved steadily over time, and the fans have been great to me. My readers are really loyal, and my fans are very supportive, so that makes a big difference too.
So and then I want to add, so when you were writing for Forbes, when was the first article that you read and you thought, bloody hell, people want to listen to my voice and what I want to say, and went viral?
That Batman article actually went right away. When I posted that, it got really big. I'm trying to let me look here and see what the article that I think really took off for me. The first one was a list, I believe, and I think it was one of my early Christmas lists that I did, and it got some ridiculous 2 million or 3 million views or something like that, which really just kind of blew my mind. But eventually it got that. At the time, I think initially that first month or two, it was maybe 100 or 200,000 views, and I was like, oh wow, okay, this is pretty good, because I went from aside from the Batman article got a lot, but then after that, when I was just making up new stuff for my articles, the readership was decent. It was good, but it wasn't astronomical. No. I would get maybe 5,000 or 10,000 views per article. 20,000 readers on an article was a big deal those first few months, the first 3 or 4 months. But then it was kind of an exponential thing. Once I had a couple that hit really big, people followed me and then kept coming back. And then when I started doing lists, by the end, I started in May, I think, of May 2011, I believe is when I started. And by that December, in October and December, when I was doing Halloween movie lists and Christmas lists, then that's when I could really tell my viewership had just kind of really spiked. And I think I was averaging anywhere from 500,000 to 1 million viewers a month on my articles. And at the time, I was doing maybe 1 or 2 articles a week. So I wasn't doing a huge number of articles to get those numbers. It was, I think, I say 1 or 2, probably 2 or 3 at that point, articles a week, I believe. And it happened very quickly. And I don't really do lists as much anymore, because they kind of,
well, everyone does lists nowadays, don't they?
Include the finances and everything, and I love doing lists, but for Forbes, it needs to have a financial component. So, when I'm doing a list, it's if I can't make the financial component feel organic in the list, then I feel like there's not really a point to it. So, I do a lot less lists than I used to, and I do a heck of a lot more interviews and reviews than I used to.
Is that something that you're enjoying going to doing more reviews and?
I do. I like it a lot. I love getting to meet the people that are making the films, obviously. I know some people that do this get very jaded, and they get to a point where it's they're like, oh, it's, they make fun of anybody who acts starstruck or anything like that. And I'm just like, I love movies. I love cinema. I'm always going to love cinema. Movies are about being transported. They're about storytelling. I don't care how jaded I'm a realist about things. I mean, people that God knows, anybody who knows me knows I can be a very cynical person about reality and life and politics, but I'm also kind of an optimist in some ways, especially about art and the things I love. And to me, even the worst, most cynical, pure finance, business-driven movie, somebody somewhere in that production gave a damn about what they were doing and had something they were trying to say somewhere in that process. And if you pay attention to even the worst movies, you can at least get a glimpse of that. And that's what I love about movies. And I'm never going to become somebody that just is dismissive and just assumes the worst and just has a pretense of being, oh, I've just seen it all. I'm over here in my corner, too cool to care about anything. That really bugs me when I see that among reviewers and people. And I understand it can be easy to become cynical in this world, but so much of it is fake, and so much of it comes from people who haven't nearly been involved or alive or doing this enough to be as jaded and cynical as they're posturing about being, basically.
No, I mean, like, when I got a screening to see Batman vs Superman, and that was generally the happiest day of my life. Well, like, it was a multimedia screening, so like, literally a lot of people went, but it was like, I don't care, I'm seeing Batman vs Superman. I couldn't be more happy.
Yeah, I always remain happy about those things. And when I see a movie, if a movie resonates with me, and I'll be honest, if I hate a movie, if I'm like, this movie is terrible, it sucks, I usually don't seek out interview opportunities.
No.
There's going to be enough people there that are going to be hammering them anyway, and I know it can be demoralizing when you're trying to talk about a film and a project that you've worked on and that you care about and that you want it to be successful, and everyone is like, why do you suck so much? That's that's no fun. And I don't see any point in doing that. There are so many movies and there's so much to talk about. I'd rather spend my time talking about the things that excite me and that I like. Yeah. And sometimes a movie is important enough or something is bad enough that you really kind of have to talk about it and you have to bring it up and discuss it. And so I do that. It's not like I never write a negative article or I never give a negative review. But if you look at my reviews, you'll see that, I might see, a few hundred movies in a year, and I'm not reviewing all those movies, okay? So some of them I just don't have time to review. Some of them, time just gets ahead of me, and it's like there's other things that are happening because, again, I also am writing screenplays. So sometimes it gets ahead of me. But generally speaking, I want to write about stuff that I like and that I enjoy, and I think I'd rather that my readers know that if they come to hear me talk about movies, that it's people who love movies and who want to hear somebody who loves movies talk about them. Yeah. Sometimes those conversations will involve bad things or negative things, but usually the things I'm most compelled to write about are the ones I enjoy. So that's why you'll see a lot more positive reviews or a lot more positive articles from me than you will negative, because the internet exists, okay? Yeah. There's enough people out there that are just, taking a dump on everything or that are being critical. If you want to hear somebody trash bad movies, I like to fish, but I don't want to shoot fish in a barrel. I want to go out on a boat, on some fun water and have a good time. So I'm not looking to just pile on and just trash a movie that's obviously bad. It's probably bad, so what's the point? And unless there's a deeper reason to bring it up, or I feel particularly offended by how bad a movie is, or by the negativity of a message, or if I think a movie is being widely hailed and it is undeserved, that I might, in those cases, sometimes I will. But usually I'm not going. Usually I've got better things to write about. Yeah,
as you said, life's too short to be miserable.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I just wanted to ask, so what is your review technique when you go to a screening? Like for me, for example, I sit there as if I was with my old man or or a mate of mine, and I just sit there just watching it as a casual audience member, but having ideas already forming in my head to when I want to write. Because I see people writing, and it's like, how can you do that? It's pitch black.
I'm like you. I don't usually take a notepad and write notes, or God forbid, I've been at screenings and I've seen people have their cell phone out and they've got a note opened on it and they're typing notes on their phone. Yeah. And I think that's horribly disrespectful to the other members of the audience. I really think that I won't get off on a rant on that. Cell phones. If you can't sit through a movie without looking at your cell phone, if you don't have 2 hours that you can't look at your screen, don't go to a movie. Stay home. Yeah. Or get up, excuse yourself, and sneak out the side door and check your phone. It's not that hard. So, anyway, when I see a movie, I give it my full attention, and I'm making notes in my head. And I'm paying attention. I'm mostly, the things that stand out to me most in a movie and that I really pay attention to are the characters and the themes of the movie and how the narrative flows and the sequencing of the story. So those and the performances, those are things I'm making mental notes on. And as soon as I get out, usually I'll jot some down or I'll take, I'll write them into my phone when the movie's over. But during the film, I want the film to pull me in and draw me in, and I don't want to be thinking about other things. ideally, I like it when I can see more than one screening of a film, or if I can go see it in theaters, and then I can, they have the screening sites online or whatever where you can watch them again, kind of thing. Some of the studios are really good about actually encouraging you to get it to do that and to see it more than one time. Others don't want you to, and I understand both positions. For me, it helps to see a film more than once because I'm going to be able to watch it. If I know I'm going to see it more than one time before I have to review it, or if I know I'm going to see it, write a tentative review, then go see it again and kind of alter that, then I can not think about anything and not even think about taking notes in my head and just experience it as an audience member first, then go back and watch it to pay attention to and take notes in my head a second time. Yeah. But usually I have to take the notes when I'm watching it, of course, and then I get out and I write down just a few words about each main point that I want to make in it. And then the review itself is a whole other issue that deals with this technical writing that I studied and how I like to write for reviews compared to something else, basically.
Yeah, so do you, when you write your reviews, do you write it as such as what would you like to know before you go in? Because for me, it's more of like, what would I want to know before going into a film, or what would my mates want to know before they go into a film? They don't particularly, most of my mates don't particularly care about like cinematography and editing. They just want to know the basic core aspects of, is it good? Why is it good? And when shall I spend 10 quid or $10 on a film?
Right. I have a few rules about reviewing the movies. Generally, I prefer not to discuss the plot. I figure if you want to know the plot of the movie, you can read that. You can type the title of the movie in Google or Yahoo, and immediately you're going to get a synopsis. You're going to get a paragraph telling you what the movie's about. If you want to know who's in it, the cast is going to be listed right there. So I want to tell you, first and foremost, again, because it's Forbes, I'm going to tell you what are my expectations on how this film will perform. I need to do that from a business perspective. So I provide that first. Then I get into how does the movie deserve to perform, and I'll provide a little quick, the movie is good. It's it does it, and I'll give you kind of a blurb if that's all you want and you don't want more analysis. But then beyond that, I don't want to talk about what the story is. I don't want to tell you what the movie's about. I've already told you, essentially, I think it's good and worth seeing, or I don't think it's worth seeing, or I didn't enjoy it, but you might. And I'll do that. I mean, there are times I've seen movies that I've admitted, I don't like this, but you probably will because most people do, and I understand why. So I recommend you see it and judge for yourself, or most people like it, but trust me, they shouldn't, and you shouldn't go see it. Whatever it is, I'll tell you quickly within a 1 or 2 paragraph little, bit. And then I go in, I like to spend most of my time talking about how the film speaks to me and what the themes are in a story. I really I don't feel like most reviews these days really talk about or try to touch on what's this movie trying to tell you. Right. How is this movie relevant to your life or to our world? Why might this movie resonate with you emotionally? And does it do a good job of it? And that's what, to me, is the essence of storytelling, is telling it's about a story that people relate to, and that you have a message, and that the characters learn something or don't learn something they should have learned. Whatever it is, that's what interests me, and what I'd like. I want my reviews to be different and to kind of get across that here are some things that you can go into this movie thinking about and watch for, and it's not going to spoil the movie for you. I'm not going to tell you plot points usually unless I have to, and then I'll give you a spoiler warning. So that's generally, I try to get at that idea. Like, what's the message? What is it trying to talk about? What concept and things in our lives is this movie touching on? And hopefully I'm able to get that across. Yeah, I mean, like,
what I like about your reviews, to big you up a little bit, is that give you a bigger ego. That with Live by Night, you gave like the financial aspects to it, and I found that that's really unique because you don't see that. So I think this film should perform with in the box office this weekend should do like $8 million or whatever. I find that really fascinating. It's like, I never really thought of that. So that's why. So, just to give you a bigger...
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you. I don't have a big ego, but I'm very conscious of the fact that my reviews... a lot of people don't like my reviews at all. A lot of people dislike my opinions, and of course there are always the childish people that are just trolling to try to get a reaction, and it's like, I haven't been in junior high in years, so you're not impressing me. But there are those other people who, they don't disagree with my opinions, they just don't like long-form writing. And that's what mine is. My writing is much more long-form. I absolutely reject the whole too long didn't read mentality of the internet when it comes to trying to just apply. There are places where that applies, there are times for that, but it doesn't apply to everything. And this attempt to just kind of universally say, don't use too many words, I don't like too many words, well, then you're going to dumb yourself down and you're going to contribute to the dumbing down of society if that's how you look at things. So for me, analyzing art, and you can go and find a review that tells you this movie's good, it's about people being punched in the face, if you like people being punched in the face, you will think this is good. You can find that. There's plenty of reviews that give you quick, straightforward, simple discussions. That's not what I want to do. I want specifically to do something that's not being done, and I want to take a long-form approach to talking about analyzing the story and what does it really mean and what's it trying to say and what did it say to me, even if I know the filmmakers weren't necessarily trying to say that. I mean, I'll be very open and I'll give you an example. When I saw Saving Mr. Banks, the Disney movie, my entire review was very personal and was about how that movie struck me and resonated with me personally because of my life. And there were themes in that movie that were universal and themes that were specific to those people, but there were also themes and elements that spoke in a singular, unique way to me personally that probably did not say those things to everybody else. Maybe only a few other people heard the same thing I did or felt the same one I did. But there were moments in that movie that were so exacting and personal for me that I had a wholly unique experience from how anyone else was going to relate to that film. And that's what I wanted to talk about. And I think it's important that some of our discussions about art and about cinema broach those topics and say, here I was rushing to be there when my father died, for me personally. And in that, I don't know if you've seen the film. So
I saw because it was on during the Christmas period in the UK, because we have a long Christmas period where films get showed, and I saw about the last 15 minutes, and even that last 15 minutes when they were talking about Let's Fly a Kite instantly touched me, because Mary Poppins is one of my favourite Disney films ever, and I don't particularly want a remake or sequel to it ever. So and Let's Fly a Kite has a bigger meaning to me now whenever I see Mary Poppins because of Saving Mr. Banks. So that, spoiler warning to anyone who hasn't heard it, skip over the next minute of what I'm saying, I guess. But when I was watching her as a child, she's gone and she tries to hurry back and doesn't make it back before her father dies and he's gone. And that moment, that single instant realization that everything I ever wanted to say is gone forever now and I'll never have a chance. That moment, and I know not everybody has that. Not everybody has been in that specific experience of not being there when a loved one or a parent or whoever was going to die, and you're trying and you're almost, and you just barely miss it. You get there moments too late, and that happened to me, and it happened to me weeks before seeing this movie. So when that happens to her and that realization, that's something that most, probably 99% of audiences won't feel a personal, deep, retching connection to, but it broke my heart in a way that only that exact thing could. And I wanted to discuss that and how, how personal our reactions to art and cinema are. So I take that long-form approach that I don't take to other writing. I mean, my screenplays are extremely
brief, and I try to leave as much white space on the page as I can in my screenplays. And when I did news, writing news articles, my news articles, of course, you're very to the point. Your sentences you're not looking for flowery words. You're trying to use the least number of words to impart the most information. So it's a choice that I make. That's my own voice coming out, and it's how, if I try to write my articles like, this is a conversation. This is what I would say to you if we were sitting in a living room drinking beer or drinking wine, or we're out at a bar, or we're over coffee or whatever, having a long conversation about the movie. These are my thoughts on this film.
Yeah, that's well. Thank you for sharing.
Oh yes, yeah.
I mean, I was the same, because a couple of years ago I had a mental health issue, and a film that really attached to me because was Love Actually. Out of all the films, it was Love Actually, because it was just something that was funny and it had heart, and it was just that I was watching it whilst in like mostly tears, and then after a while I stopped, and then I started laughing. And every time that film, because Love Actually is on a lot in the UK, whenever it comes on, I just watch it every time, because it's just something that's connected to me personally now. And I would choose that film over like The Dark Knight or whatever, and a lot of people would go mental at me for it, but it's like, no, like, I've got specific reasons why Love Actually is my favourite film ever, and will probably most likely will be to the day I die.
It's a terrific film. I think I named it number 1 on my list of the best. I do a lot of different Christmas movie lists, and I think it was my number 1 romantic Christmas movie of all time, and or maybe comedy, Christmas comedy of all time. But yeah, it's a terrific movie. And when I hear people that are kind of like not interested or roll their eyes, I'm like, you really, really, really need to rewatch this movie 1,000,000 times until you get it, until it resonates, because that is, if you don't appreciate Love Actually, then I think you're missing out on one of the best modern romantic comedies, romantic films, comedies, Christmas movies, films about relationships. There's so many levels. Yeah, I mean, like, it's like every story can have a personal connection to anyone, or even every story can take elements and bring it into your own life. Yeah. So, so you've been journalism and writing for a long time now, and I just wanted to ask you about the whole clickbait generation now of film writing. Does it get on your nerves? It does, and I have a whole lot of different feelings about it. I think the biggest clickbait is not inherently bad. Oh no, of course not. Because clickbait is why does clickbait exist? Well, because it's the equivalent of being, if you're in a room with 5 people and having conversations and you want to say something, you don't have to scream or do something outrageous to get attention. No. If you're in the middle of a crowded square with 500,000 people and you're trying to say something, or you need some attention, then you're going to climb up on a street pole and yell. If your job and what you're trying to sell, and you're trying to support yourself for a living, and you have kids at home, then if you're standing in that crowded square and you need to get attention, then you might climb up on the pole naked to get, so how we react. And so clickbait is a problem when it's dishonest, when it's hyperbolic in a negative, dishonest way, when it's seeking to manipulate and mislead people strictly for monetary gain of the people posting it when they know better. There's a lot of that kind of thing. I don't think that an inherently exaggerated headline depends. There's matters of degree. All of this is matters of degree. And when people say, where do you draw the line? I'm like, well, where do you draw the line at anything? Where do you draw the line at speed limits? Where do you draw the line at what's appropriate to say at the dinner table to your parents? Where do you draw the line at anything? We draw lines every day. Our society and civil society is based on the idea that we all draw lines in our behavior and in the behavior of others in order to get along. So we live in a world full of lines, and we recognize that, and we make judgments. We're adults. We either accept that we're making judgments, or we pretend that we're not, and we act like children. Clickbait is a problem when it's a problem, and when it's bad, and when the intent and the outcome is bad. And I regret that the internet has created a situation where people are so used to, where there's so much out there that having to scream to be heard above the noise has caused a situation where all anybody's doing is screaming. So once again, to use the analogy, if you're in a room, if you're in a crowded street and there's a million people and you're yelling to be heard, but everybody else is yelling, and the more everybody yells, the louder you have to raise your voice, then everyone's raising their voice louder. That becomes a problem. And nobody's being heard, and you can't believe anything you're hearing, and all anybody's goal becomes, your goal isn't to impart the information anymore, it's just to be heard. You just want your scream. You may as well just be going, ah, and it doesn't matter if you're saying anything. That's what clickbait has kind of become, I think, and that's a problem. Really, the only thing that changes when on the one hand, people decide to say, I'm not going to listen when you scream if you don't have something to say. And then when the people who are screaming say, okay, just because everybody else is screaming doesn't mean I have to. Maybe being a person who's whispering when everyone is screaming, if you're just kind of whispering a little bit or talking in a normal tone, maybe that's what people are going to notice now, because you're the only one doing that. We need behavioral changes on both sides. The people posting clickbait, but also the people who are encouraging it, because it only works if you click it. It's only clickbait if you do it. And we have got to be able to it's not like clickbait's hard to recognize. You can tell. I mean, anything inherently that says, watch so-and-so make a fool out of so-and-so, exclamation point. All those kind of political articles, so-and-so totally schools Senator so-and-so. That's always clickbait. It's always BS. It's always junk food for your brain, and it's always a waste of your time. Don't click things with those kind of headlines. There's, right there, you can save yourself a lot of trouble. Headlines that when you look at them, you go, what? That can't be true about casting in a movie or something. Well, chances are, if something in that headline made you go, what? That can't be, proceed with caution. I'm not saying don't click it, just don't share it. Don't keep clicking it. Don't keep talking about it. It's like if you see a forest fire, you don't run up, put a stick in it, light the end of the stick, then run back home to your friends and go, look at the fire. You're just going to spread the fire if you do that. So
I mean, like with most of this clickbait generation now is a lot of people come to you when it's DC related. So do you like that fans want to hear your opinion, or does it sometimes grate on you? It's like, I can't comment on everything because I don't even know.
I don't. First of all, I appreciate that fans trust me on it. It doesn't. It frustrates me on their behalf because I feel like it's a permanent condition of being permanently in crisis mode and permanently walking around on edge, so that everything makes you go and jump at it like nervously, and that fans need to get out of permanent crisis mode so that it's not that. I mean, it's realistically, I get so many questions. I get so much on Twitter and on Facebook and direct messages, and people will email me through and send me messages, not just posting comments on my articles. They'll send me messages through Forbes, and I just get, it's just a nonstop. I mean, I can't realistically respond to a dozen or 24 questions from strangers every day, and also questions from other journalists and also from my friends. I mean, everybody's asking, and it's like balancing that. Sometimes there's stuff that I can't talk about, that if I know it, I'm not in a position where I can't even be honest with you and say that I know something about some things. If somebody asks me, there was a point at which, a few weeks ago, I don't even want to go down that road or play that game. I'll say there are things that if people asked me about, then I would just be like, I don't know, I don't know it. I can't say anything. I don't know. And I just kind of have to play dumb because I'm not in a position to answer. Other times, if I've heard rumors, like I saw somebody, I know we're going to get to questions later, but somebody asked a question about something related to the DCU. And the truth is, I hear rumors and I hear whispers about stuff, but I don't want to pass along. There are rumors that I'm willing to pass along and say, hey, fans, I've heard this. I'm just letting you know I don't know what's to it. Some of the time, rumors are not just rumors, and I have good sources, and I'll do an article. But if I don't do an article, if all I'm doing is passing a rumor or my expectation along, that means it's something that's not solid. I don't know. I have my own belief or suspicion, but I honestly don't know factually for sure. It's just a guess. It's just a rumor. I'm just telling. Then there's other rumors that aren't even worth repeating because I don't know, and I don't want to start rumor mongering, and I don't want to set people off.
No.
So there's a lot of times that when I get these questions, like, have you heard anything? I tend to try to remind people, if I've heard anything that I can repeat, then I'll tell you by Twitter, or I'll do an article on it. If it's something that I can't mention publicly or in an article, then I'm not going to be able to respond like, hey, do you know who they're casting as Jon Stewart in Green Lantern Corps? Well, I haven't said anything, so if I knew, do you think I was just like, oh, well, finally, I'm glad somebody asked me on Twitter. Yes, I know, actually. Here's who it is. I can't, that's stuff that, like, but I understand, I don't resent it, and I don't mean to make fun of it. What I mean is just that, I get a lot of these questions. I understand fans are anxious, fans are hopeful, fans trust me, and I respect that and I appreciate it, but I'm not always in a position to say anything. And so sometimes if you have a question that's about something that, like, you can always ask yourself, if the answer was yes, would he have already probably mentioned it on, at least on social media or in an article or something, So it gets difficult because I have a lot of friends that want to know stuff and that think, well, we're I mean lots of people and family members that will ask me like, hey, tell me, I won't say anything. What's going on? And I'm like, I can't say anything to you. No, if I know anything, I can't even say whether I know or not. So if you ask me something I don't know on that topic, I'm still going to say I can't answer. I'm not going to say I don't know. I would tell you if I did or whatever. So I can't I have to really avoid I have to walk a fine line a lot of times. And I'll tell you, if it frustrates you, just remember the reason that I do get information and that sometimes I can tell you what's really happening is because I have good relationships. And I have those relationships because I respect the people who give me information and they respect me and trust me. Maintaining trust and respect is a two-way street, and I have to keep that in mind. So I have to be very careful what I say and who I say it to and when I say it.
I mean, like, my motto is when I email, press people for screenings, I treat them how I want to be treated. It's, as you said, all down to respect.
Yes.
And I mean, like, obviously, I'm one of those people who've I've asked you questions from now and then. So, I mean, like,
and that's fine, and nobody should feel bad.
No.
If you want to ask me questions, I just want to make that clear. I don't. People are always free to ask, just as long as they understand. A lot of times I can't answer, and a lot of times I might have to answer, and then later, tell you, sorry, I just couldn't tell you the truth at that time. And there's stuff that I have denied that I'll always deny, and I'll never be in a position on my deathbed. Maybe I'll be like, I secretly, but there's a lot of stuff that's just that's how it happens,
So let's move on, and I want to talk about two big news stories that's happened very recently. So let's talk about the Oscars and what were your overall thoughts on. Do you think, like with La La Land getting 14 nominations, and did you think that Deadpool deserved a nomination for Best Adapted Screenplay, like many other film journalists and commentators thought it deserved or hoped?
Well, I'll take them in reverse order. On Deadpool, I love Deadpool. I think it's a great film. The trouble is, there were a lot of movies. This year was a terrific year for film. I noted in my article last night, and I've told people over and over, I have a very, very solid list of 36 movies that were valid contenders that you could pick any 5 movies off of this list of 36 movies and make a respectable Best Picture list.
Yeah.
You could totally do it. So with 36 movies, there are an awful, for Best Picture quality movies, there are a lot of adapted screenplays in that list. So Deadpool was great, but at the same time, I think we have to be realistic that it faced a lot of stiff competition and that's something that I know fans tend to think that it's always that these things tend to always be biased, and as they hopefully know very well, when I think there's bias, I call it out. I eagerly, readily say, I think this is bogus. I think this is bias. And bias, by the way, is not a dirty word. We all have bias. It exists, so there's no point in pretending it doesn't. But that said, not everything is biased just because it doesn't turn out the way we want. And I don't think that Deadpool was a victim of any particular bias against the genre or against the film itself. The fact that Deadpool was being talked about as a possible Oscar nominee is itself a huge sign of where the genre is at. And when I look at the actual nominees, I mean, let's look at I've got them here in front of me on my phone now. Look at the adapted screenplays. Was the script for Deadpool better than Moonlight?
Yeah.
Was the script for Deadpool better than Lion? Was the script for Deadpool better than Fences? Was the script for Deadpool better than Hidden Figures? Was the script for Deadpool better than Arrival? Well, some people might say yes, but I think that if we're being honest and realistic, we have to be able to admit, if you think Deadpool definitely was better than one or more of those scripts, hopefully you can at least honestly admit that those screenplays that I named, it is very reasonable for other people to think that those screenplays were better than Deadpool's. And here's the rub. How many people that are saying Deadpool should have been nominated for, I know there are fans who are upset. How many of them have read the script? How many of them actually read the screenplay for Deadpool and then read the screenplay of those other films? I have the screenplays for the nominees, and I can tell you they are exceptional screenplays, okay?
Yeah, right.
So it's all subjective, and people will say, well, that's just your opinion. Yeah, of course it is, and it's your opinion that they're not as good or whatever. But at the end of the day, I would have been very shocked if Deadpool actually got a nomination, and that is not meant as an insult to those scriptwriters. It's just a recognition that this year every field is crowded, and especially Best Picture and the two screenplay categories were very, very difficult, along with the performance categories, because there were so many to choose from. The competition was so stiff. The odds against any film that wasn't also a Best Picture nominee, the odds of getting a screenplay nomination were very, very low for anyone if you weren't in the Best Picture. I mean, look at how many of the nominees for the screenplay out of 10 nominees, I think 2, is that right? There were 2 that weren't nominated for Best Picture, and that's it?
Yeah, I think so.
So,
yeah,
that
sounds about right.
Now, the other question was La La Land,
yeah,
14 nominations. I know there's some backlash against La La Land, but look, this is how many great modern musicals are there? There aren't that many. People can point to a few, but this is an original. All the songs in this movie, look at these original songs. Look at this choreography and this directing. Yeah. This is a terrific classic it's like old school Hollywood classic studio filmmaking. And it was made by an indie director who's just expressing his love of Hollywood history and Hollywood cinema. And I think it's a remarkable movie, and if this movie had not gotten a huge number of nominations and wasn't a front runner, then that would have shocked me. I was not surprised that it got so many nominations. I would have been shocked if it got less than 10 nominations, frankly.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same. I put it in my because it came out very early in the UK, like last couple of weeks ago. And it was my third most anticipated film of 2017, just below like 2 little films, Justice League and Star Wars.
Well, there's a lot of people that I know that are kind of like, oh, La La, and some of them haven't even seen it. And if you haven't seen a movie and you're acting jaded and over it or whatever, then you need to get over yourself, first of all. But then I know some people who've seen it and didn't like it. But every time I hear, and it's a very small number of people, but every time I hear someone saw it and didn't like it, I am legitimately stunned.
Yeah.
I am just like, I cannot wrap my head around somebody watching it even if you don't enjoy it, if you walked out of La La Land and thought that was not great filmmaking and clearly a deserving frontrunner for the nominations for Best Picture, then I don't know how you perceive cinema, honestly. Because I can walk out of a movie and not have enjoyed it and not care if I ever see it again, but also recognize, that was great filmmaking, and that's probably going to be a frontrunner for Best Picture, but things about the movie, about the themes, the characters, and stories did not resonate to me personally. I did not enjoy that experience, even if I understand why most people will. Birdman's a great example. Birdman's one of the most acclaimed Oscar nominees in recent memory. I gave it a terrible review, but I also understand why everybody else, I see what people admired about it, even if I didn't feel the same way.
No. And then there's the next big story that happened yesterday with the official title of Star Wars Episode 8.
Yeah.
What did you think? Were you as excited as everyone else on social media? Was it like, did you like the title?
Yeah, I think it's we have to wait and see what it's about. But I think it's a terrific title. I think the thing to keep in mind is this isn't the last film of a trilogy. No. This is the middle film of a trilogy. Yeah. So when you hear Jedi is singular and plural. Yeah. So we remember Yoda told Luke that when he said, when I'm gone, the last of the Jedi you will be. So we already were told Luke was the last Jedi, and then
it was even in the opening crawl in Force Awakens. Luke Skywalker, the last of the Jedi. The last Jedi. Yeah,
and it mentions him there. So there's the setup for that, and then there's also the reversal. That title has a built-in reversal where it can mean one thing at the start of the film and something else at the end, because is he going to pass the torch and then he dies possibly and passes it on to her, to Rey? Yeah. Or is she going to join him and together the two of them are the last Jedi? Because it's a beginning, it's a next step. It's not an ending. So The Last Jedi is the middle stage of a trilogy. So keep that in mind and the implications of that in mind. So I'm very excited because there's so much. I'm excited by how much we don't know yet and by what it could mean, really.
Yeah. I mean, I with the red font, I think we're going to get a very Sith-based or Knights of Ren-based storyline as well as a Luke storyline.
Yeah, I think I'm excited for it. I'm very jazzed. So I look forward to it. And of course, there's the bittersweet element of getting to see Carrie Fisher for the last time, and we're going to be saying goodbye to Princess Leia. So there's a lot of reasons to anticipate this film and to be really hopeful for it.
Do you think there's going to be like a sort of Heath Ledger effect when he passed away before The Dark Knight came out, there was sort of let's see Heath Ledger's final full performance?
Well, I don't really know because we don't know how big her role is or how significant, but I'll say that if she has a significant amount of screen time, which I'm hoping that she has a lot of screen time, I'm hoping that knowing that she's in this and was intended to carry on into the third story kind of hints that maybe her role is bigger in the second film and was intended to be even bigger moving into the third. So, I mean, it's possible. Carrie Fisher's a terrific performer, and it's Princess Leia for the last time on the big screen, and I'm sure that when it comes time, while they're editing the movie and they're working on it, I'm sure they will take into account the fact that this is the last time any of us will ever see Carrie Fisher in a new movie again, and it's the last time Princess Leia will be in a movie. So I have to think that that's going to affect how they put the film together, and so it's possible if the role's big enough, and depending on how the film turns out, that if it's if the role's big enough and good enough and they put it together a certain way, then I could definitely see a sort of Heath Ledger effect that enhances everyone's desire to go back and see the film over and over and revisit it. And maybe, who knows? I mean, it's way too early to talk about, but just to be completely irresponsible, since it is Oscar season, to tie this conversation into Oscars, could we end up seeing a nomination for Carrie Fisher? We'll find out, I guess.
So that was part 1 of my interview with Mark Hughes. To know when part 2 is dropping, make sure you're following me on Twitter at Sean_Wren and on Facebook at the Sean Wren blog. Also follow Mark Hughes on Twitter at Mark Hughes Films. Thank you for listening, have a great weekend,